Your kind always tries to sneak in, not today. The words sliced through the calm morning like broken glass. They didn't come as a mistake. They were sharp, deliberate, spoken with the confidence of someone who thought she owned the air around her. Isabella Marquez stood at the arch of white lilies, a red silk dress blazing against the soft gray sky. One hand rested on her hip, the other clutching an iPad like a gavel ready to pass judgment. Her eyes swept over Marcus Deshawn, the man in front of her, and in a single glance, she decided he didn't belong. Gasps rippled from nearby guests. Champagne glasses froze midair. A cluster of investors and socialites turned, their curiosity sharpened by the scent of conflict. Marcus stood silent. No entourage, no designer suit, just a crisp, white shirt, black slacks, and the kind of calm that unnerved people who thrived on chaos. He met her stare without flinching. "You heard me," Isabella pressed, her voice loud enough for the crowd. "This is a private event. You don't belong here." She tilted the iPad toward him as if it held proof. "Your name isn't on the list. Step aside." A couple nearby smirked. One whispered, "Probably staff." Another chuckled, "Bold move, trying to get dressed like that." Marcus didn't move. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Check again." The tension thickened. Isabella's smile widened, cruel, rehearsed. "Don't waste my time. We've seen this before, people showing up pretending to be someone they're not. You think you're the first?" Her words landed heavy, carried on the still, fresh air of the morning garden. The music from a nearby quartet faltered as the violinist missed a note, distracted by the scene unfolding at the entrance. Marcus adjusted his cuff, calm, almost casual, like a man who had walked through this fire 100 times before. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus." Isabella leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough for those nearest to catch. "Walk away before this gets embarrassing. You're not wanted here." The morning light caught Marcus's face. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead. He simply stared back, a quiet storm behind his eyes. And that silence, that refusal to shrink, was the first crack in the flawless mask Isabella wore. Isabella didn't lower her voice. She wanted every guest within 20 feet to hear. "Security will handle this," she declared, tapping her iPad with a manicured nail. "We don't allow imposters to crash events of this caliber." Laughter trickled from the cocktail tables. A man in a navy blazer muttered, "Who let him get this far?" Another guest, a woman with a pearl necklace, shook her head with theatrical pity. Marcus remained still, his shoulders square, his silence heavier than any protest. He adjusted his cuff again, the tiniest gesture, but one that made Isabella's smirk falter for half a second, and then she snapped. With a swift motion, Isabella reached forward and yanked the invitation card Marcus had been holding. The delicate white cardstock cracked in her grip, then tore clean in half. She dropped the pieces onto the grass like discarded trash. Gasps erupted. One glass shattered as a server froze mid-step and fumbled a tray. The string quartet stopped playing altogether, the violin bow hung in the air, silence filling the garden. "You see?" Isabella lifted her chin, eyes glittering with disdain. "Worthless, just like him." For a moment nobody moved. The morning air seemed to hold its breath. From the corner, Oliver Grant shifted uncomfortably. He'd already seen Marcus's name on the official list highlighted, in fact, with a VIP tag. Isabella had scrolled right past it. Now, with the invitation ripped in front of everyone, Oliver's pulse raced. He raised his phone a little higher, recording. Somewhere in the crowd, a guest whispered too loudly, "He looks like staff. Maybe he tried to sneak food." Another replied, "Unbelievable, in broad daylight." Isabella leaned closer to Marcus, her perfume sharp, her tone venom wrapped in silk. "Leave now before you embarrass yourself any further. You'll thank me later." Marcus's eyes didn't waver. His voice was calm, measured, and carried farther than anyone expected. "Check again." That was when something strange happened. The PA system, already connected for the morning announcements, picked up his words through a nearby microphone left live on the stage. His low baritone echoed across the entire garden. Every guest heard it crisp, undeniable. Heads turned, phones lifted. The moment was no longer private. It had become public theater. And Isabella, for the first time, realized she had just written herself into the opening act of a story she couldn't control. The words rolled across the garden, amplified by the speakers as if the earth itself had decided to take his side. Check again. Guests turned in unison, phones tilted higher, screens glowing as they caught every flicker of tension between the woman in the red dress and the man in the plain white shirt. Isabella's face hardened. She hadn't expected her stage to turn into his microphone. "Cut the audio," she hissed toward the sound booth. But the technician just blinked, frozen, because every guest was already watching, already recording. Oliver's phone trembled in his hand. He could feel the moment shifting, could feel that this wasn't just another guest being dismissed, it was bigger. He glanced at Marcus, then at Isabella, and his conscience screamed louder than his fear. Isabella, sensing the shift, doubled down. She lifted her voice, words dripping with venom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man is not on our list. He is trespassing, and this is exactly why we enforce strict entry standards." Her declaration carried over the PA as well. Gasps rippled again. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in blind agreement. A man near the champagne bar muttered, "Finally, someone says it out loud." Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply looked at Isabella with a calm so steady it was unnerving. "Is that your final answer?" His voice, still picked up by the open mic, echoed once more. A hush fell, and then, with a slow, deliberate gesture, Isabella held up the torn pieces of his invitation like trophies. "My final answer is this," she said, her tone triumphant. "Fraud has no place here." The crowd reacted instantly. One guest actually clapped, a sharp, awkward sound that died quickly when no one joined in. Another whispered into her phone's camera, "Unbelievable. This is going to blow up online." Oliver's jaw tightened. He could see Marcus's name still on the list, glowing under executive access. He swallowed hard. His thumb hovered over the record button, then pressed it fully. This had to be documented. Marcus finally moved. He straightened his shoulders, took a step forward, and the crowd instinctively parted. His voice carried once again, calm but razor-sharp. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your professional life." And though the words were spoken evenly, the way they thundered through the garden made every guest believe it. Isabella's smile flickered. For the first time, doubt cracked her mask. For a moment, the garden was silent except for the faint rustle of the morning breeze through the lilies. Isabella stood tall, clutching the torn pieces of the invitation like they were proof of her dominance. Marcus stood taller, calm, collected, his presence suddenly filling the space that Isabella had tried so hard to control. "Biggest mistake," Isabella laughed, her voice sharp and brittle. "The only mistake is letting you get this far. Security." She snapped her fingers toward the edge of the lawn, but the two guards stationed there hesitated. They had heard his voice through the PA. They had seen the cameras raised, the phones already streaming. Oliver's heart pounded. His screen showed dozens of tiny red recording dots from other phones around the garden. This wasn't just a dispute anymore, it was a public spectacle. Marcus slipped a hand into his pocket and drew out his phone. No rush, no panic. He tapped once, lifted it to his ear, and spoke in the same even tone. "Nia, log this moment. Video, audio, everything." A crisp female voice answered from the other end, loud enough that Oliver, standing close, heard it. "Logged and time-stamped, sir." The reaction was immediate. Guests leaned closer, whispering, "Sir?" Phones zoomed in. Isabella's face tightened. "Pathetic," she spat, her voice shaking just slightly. "Calling backup won't change the fact that you don't belong here." Marcus looked at her as though she hadn't spoken at all. His gaze was steady, unnerving. "Begin escalation protocol," he continued into the phone. The words weren't loud, but through the still-hot mic connected to the PA, every guest heard them. Escalation protocol. It sounded official, heavy, dangerous. A murmur surged through the crowd. Oliver caught the moment on camera, his lens steady now. He could feel it, the tide was shifting. Isabella's bravado cracked. "This is absurd. Do you all not see what's happening? He's pretending, and you're all eating it up." Her voice rose, desperate. But no one moved to back her up. The torn invitation in her hand no longer looked like evidence. It looked like a mistake. Marcus ended the call with a quiet, deliberate tap. Then he turned back to Isabella, his voice carrying like a verdict. "You should have checked again." And this time, the silence that followed wasn't in her favor. Isabella's laugh was sharper now, brittle like glass under pressure. You think a phone call makes you important? You're delusional. She flung the torn halves of Marcus's invitation into the air, and the pieces fluttered down like confetti onto the garden lawn. Worthless paper for a worthless man. The crowd gasped again. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, others craned their necks, hungry for more. The violinist who had stopped earlier now lowered his bow completely, eyes wide, as though even music had no place in this kind of spectacle. Marcus didn't move. He stood firm, his presence unnervingly steady while Isabella's composure slipped further with every word. "Leave," she ordered, stepping closer. The red silk of her dress brushed against his sleeve as she jabbed a finger toward the exit gate. "Or I'll have you removed myself." Her raised voice carried across the garden, and for the first time, whispers of doubt began to ripple through the crowd. Oliver captured everything Isabella's finger jabbing, her voice sharp with disdain, the way Marcus didn't flinch. His recording picked up mutters from the guests around him. Did she just tear up his invite? Why is she so loud? This feels wrong. He hasn't raised his voice once. Isabella, noticing the shift, pushed harder. "People like you don't walk into events like this," she spat. "You sneak in, you beg, you pretend." The words hung heavy, cutting through the morning calm. One guest, a woman in a pale blue dress, gasped audibly. Another raised her phone higher, whispering, "This is going online right now." Marcus finally turned, not to Isabella, but to the crowd itself. His voice was low, calm, yet amplified by the open PA system, still carrying every syllable. "I asked for one thing, check again." Instead, she tore it up. You all saw it. Dozens of phones tilted toward Isabella. Her painted smile faltered. She tried one last time to regain control, raising her voice into the mic's reach. "Enough of this. Guards, remove him now." But the guards still didn't move. Their eyes flicked toward the guests, toward the rows of raised cameras. Removing him would mean removing themselves from their jobs by the end of the day. Oliver's recording caught it all, the hesitation, the fear, the shift in the balance of power, and for the first time, Isabella realized she wasn't just fighting Marcus. She was fighting the weight of every witness in the garden. The garden air grew tighter, like the moment before a storm breaks. Dozens of phones hovered in the air, screens glowing, cameras aimed squarely at Isabella and Marcus. She could feel the weight of every lens pressing against her skin, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. "You think standing silent makes you powerful?" Isabella sneered, stepping closer. Her heels dug into the grass, her red silk dress swaying with each sharp movement. "It makes you pathetic. You're wasting everyone's time." Marcus said nothing. He didn't need to. The calm in his eyes was louder than her shouting. That silence broke her. With a sudden snap of motion, Isabella reached out and grabbed Marcus's sleeve. Gasps erupted, instantly sharp, collective, disbelieving. The moment her manicured nails dug into his shirt, it was as if the entire event shifted from discomfort to outrage. "Don't touch him," a voice rang out. It was Aisha Reynolds, the woman in the white dress near the cocktail tables. She stood, her chair scraping against the stone. Her words cut through the hush, trembling with anger. "He's a guest. I saw his name on the list this morning." Dozens of heads whipped toward her. Isabella froze for half a second, her grip still clamped on Marcus's sleeve. "Stay out of this," she snapped, her voice trembling now, "or you'll regret it." But the damage was already done. Another guest, a gray-haired man with his phone raised, shook his head. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," he muttered, loud enough for Oliver's recording to catch. "This is humiliating." And the murmur grew, spreading through the garden like fire catching dry leaves. Isabella yanked her hand back, her face flushing with a mix of rage and panic. "He doesn't belong here," she barked. "People like him never do." Her words echoed through the PA system, unfiltered, undeniable, and in that instant, the whispers turned into open protest. "That's enough," someone shouted. "She just said that out loud?" another voice gasped. "This is disgusting," a third added, shaking her head. Oliver's camera caught it all. The torn invitation on the grass, the way Isabella's hand had clutched Marcus's sleeve, the growing wave of disgust rolling through the crowd. Marcus, still unmoved, finally spoke again. His voice steady, calm, amplified for all to hear. "You can tear paper, you can raise your voice, but you can't erase the truth." The words struck like a gavel. The guests shifted, almost instinctively forming a loose barrier around him, as if the garden itself was choosing sides. And Isabella, standing alone in her blazing red dress, realized the power she thought she controlled had just slipped completely out of her hands. The crowd had shifted. Where moments ago they'd been curious spectators, now they stood shoulder to shoulder, forming an invisible wall between Marcus and Isabella. Phones hovered higher, recording every second. The event that was supposed to celebrate exclusivity had turned into a public trial, and Isabella was on the losing side. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, fury battling panic. She jabbed a finger at Marcus again, her voice cracking despite the amplification. "He's not on the list. He's lying to all of you. He doesn't belong here." But Oliver knew the truth. The name Marcus Deshawn glowed on his tablet, highlighted in gold under executive access. He took a step forward, his lips parting, but Marcus's steady gaze stopped him. Not yet. Marcus lifted his phone once more, slow and deliberate. The movement alone drew silence. Every guest leaned in. Nia, his voice was even, calm, impossible to ignore as it rippled through the PA. "Proceed to stage 2. Lock this moment into the system. Timestamp every second." "Confirmed," Nia's voice replied, crisp and professional through the speaker. "Stage 2 initiated." Oh, the words hit the crowd like thunder. Stage 2. It sounded corporate, official, unstoppable. Guests whispered, their voices sharp with realization. "What system is he talking about?" "Stage 2. This feels serious." "Wait, Marcus Deshawn? I know that name." Isabella's face blanched, but she pressed on, desperate. "Don't fall for this performance," she shouted, the tremor in her tone betraying her. "He's nothing but a pretender with a phone and a story." But the crowd wasn't buying it. Too many had seen her tear the invitation. Too many had heard her words about people like him. The evidence was already spilling into live streams, comment threads igniting in real time. Aisha Reynolds stepped closer now, standing firmly in view of the cameras. Her voice was calm but unwavering. "He doesn't have to prove anything. You just showed us who you are." The garden buzzed with agreement. Isabella's eyes darted from face to face, realizing with dawning horror that the support she thought she owned was evaporating. Marcus ended the call with a quiet tap, his expression unchanged. He finally turned fully to the crowd, not just to Isabella, his voice resonant and steady. "You all wanted a list? You'll have more than that. In a few minutes, you'll see exactly who belongs here and why." The air pulsed with anticipation. Guests held their breath, knowing something irreversible was coming. And for Isabella, standing in her fiery red dress under a gray morning sky, the fear she'd never admit crept across her face for the first time. The garden had become a stage. Every guest, every server, every musician was locked in place, watching the battle unfold in real time. Phones hovered like satellites, capturing each breath, each word, each flicker of expression. And Isabella, her red silk dress blazing under the soft gray sky, refused to surrender her spotlight. "You're all fools," she snapped, her voice shrill now, echoing through the PA. She turned in a circle, arms raised, daring the crowd to disagree. "This man is lying to you. He doesn't belong in this world, and I will not let him tarnish this event." But the crowd didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stared, some in disbelief, some in disgust, all with phones pointed directly at her. Marcus stood motionless, a pillar of composure. His calm made her rage look like desperation. So she went further. With a sudden lunge, Isabella reached for Marcus's phone, her manicured fingers swiping at the device in his hand. Gasps erupted across the garden. A few guests shouted, "Hey!" and "Stop!" But her hand was already clutching the edge of the phone. Marcus didn't fight. He simply let her pull, let her perform her desperation in front of an audience of hundreds. The phone slipped briefly from his hand, and in that instant, Oliver's camera caught the scene perfectly. Isabella clawing like a thief, Marcus still, steady, letting her dig her own grave. "Pathetic," Isabella hissed, waving the phone aloft like a prize. "See? Just a prop. Just another faker with toys he doesn't understand." But then the phone lit up. Bright, undeniable. The lock screen flashed with a headline alert that every guest near enough to see instantly recognized. "Horizon Tech finalizes $8 billion acquisition, CEO to address press live." Gasps rolled through the garden like thunder. Whispers turned into stunned voices. "Wait, Horizon Tech? That's him? That's Marcus Deshawn? He's the CEO?" Isabella's triumph evaporated in real time. The phone in her hand felt like it was burning. She dropped it as though it had betrayed her, and Marcus caught it effortlessly before it hit the ground. His movements were slow, deliberate, powerful without needing to shout. He raised the phone to his ear again, his voice carrying across the PA with measured calm. "Nia, move to stage 3. Notify the press we're ahead of schedule. We'll do the announcement here, live." "Confirmed," Nia's voice replied, firm and clear for all to hear. The crowd erupted not with applause yet, but with realization. Dozens of phones zoomed in on Marcus, and for the first time, his name wasn't a whisper, it was a chorus. And Isabella, standing frozen, red dress clinging to her like a warning flare, knew she had just handed him the stage she'd tried so hard to keep him from. The garden erupted into a low roar, voices rising and colliding like waves. Guests turned to one another, disbelief etched across their faces. The whispers were no longer questions, they were confirmations. "That's him. That's Marcus Deshawn. He owns Horizon Tech. He's the one behind the $8 billion deal." Every phone stayed raised, recording history in real time. Isabella stood frozen, the red silk of her dress trembling with the rise and fall of her unsteady breath. Her hand, the one that had clutched his phone, now shook visibly at her side. Marcus looked at her calmly, as if weighing whether to waste another second. Then he stepped forward, his voice steady, amplified by the still live PA system. "My name is Marcus Deshawn," he said, his words crisp, deliberate. "Founder and CEO of Horizon Tech, and in less than 10 minutes, I'll be announcing the completion of an $8 billion acquisition." The words detonated across the garden. A collective gasp, a ripple of shock so loud it drowned the soft morning breeze. Phones swung toward Isabella, toward Marcus, toward the scattered fragments of the invitation she had torn. Isabella staggered back half a step, her confidence bleeding out of her face. "No," she whispered, barely audible. "That's impossible." Marcus didn't even look at her. He turned slightly, addressing the crowd instead. "I came here quietly. I came here as any other guest would, and you all saw what happened when my name was dismissed, when my presence was questioned, when my dignity was torn apart." His voice grew heavier, every word sinking deep. "Respect doesn't come from a suit or a title. It doesn't come from a piece of paper, and it certainly doesn't come from permission." The crowd broke into applause, scattered at first, then swelling into something undeniable. A few guests shouted, "Yes, and tell it," while others simply clapped, eyes locked on him. Oliver's phone shook as he captured the moment, his chest tight with awe. This was bigger than an argument at a gate. This was truth slicing through arrogance. Isabella tried to speak, but the sound that left her throat was brittle, broken. You should have said who you were." Marcus finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No," he said simply. "You should have treated me like who I am, a guest." The applause thundered louder. Guests began to move, not away from Marcus, but closer, instinctively forming a circle around him. Isabella found herself outside of it, isolated, her red dress now a mark of her downfall. And for the first time since the confrontation began, she realized she wasn't the center of the story anymore. She was just the cautionary tale. The applause still echoed across the garden, bouncing off the stone walls and lily arches, when Isabella stumbled forward, desperate to reclaim ground that no longer existed. "Wait, please, everyone, you don't understand?" Her voice cracked as she raised her hands, palms out, like she could push back the tide of judgment rolling toward her. "I was just protecting the event. You have to understand that." No one nodded. No one agreed. Phones stayed raised, recording her unraveling. "You tore up his invitation," a man in the front said bluntly, his voice sharp. "We all saw it." "You grabbed his arm," another guest added, disgust thick in her tone. "You humiliated him in front of all of us." The crowd's energy shifted from curiosity to condemnation. A chorus of voices rose against her. She should be removed. Unprofessional. Racist, plain and simple. Each accusation landed like a stone, and Isabella's poise shattered. Her red silk dress no longer made her look powerful, it made her look cornered, a flare burning out. Marcus remained where he stood, calm, still. He hadn't moved to silence the crowd, hadn't lifted a hand to control it. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to anchor the moment. "Please," Isabella stammered, her words tumbling desperate. "I didn't know who he was. If I had known, Marcus cut her off, his voice steady. carrying weight without volume. That's the point. You didn't care who I was. You decided who I wasn't. The words landed harder than any shout. The garden grew quiet again, the crowd hanging on the pause that followed. Oliver zoomed in with his phone, his pulse racing. He knew this was the footage that would go viral, the footage that would define the morning. Isabella's eyes darted, searching for someone, anyone, to back her up. But the guests had turned their backs, not physically, but emotionally. Their faces were closed, cold, judgmental. Aisha Reynolds stepped forward, her voice cutting like steel wrapped in silk. You embarrassed him in front of all of us, and now you've embarrassed yourself. Ugh. The words drew murmurs of agreement, nods from every corner of the garden. Isabella's voice broke. I was following protocol. I was making sure the event stayed clean. Marcus's gaze didn't shift. Respect is not protocol, he said evenly. It's principle. The line hung in the air, undeniable, final. Isabella's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she looked small in her fiery dress, like a flame that had burned too brightly and was now nothing but smoke. And Marcus, calm as ever, prepared for the decision that would close this chapter once and for all. The silence was heavy, as though the garden itself was holding its breath. Isabella stood trembling, her eyes darting wildly, searching for a single sympathetic face. But all she found were phones raised higher, lenses trained on her every stutter, every collapse. Marcus finally moved, not rushed, not angry, just one calm step forward, the morning light settling on his shoulders like he belonged there all along. Oliver, he said, his voice measured, carrying through the PA system that had betrayed Isabella's cruelty from the beginning. Send her out. The young assistant's breath caught, but his legs moved without hesitation. His tablet still displayed Marcus's name, Executive Access. Now the truth was undeniable. He gestured toward the guards, his tone firm. Escort her from the premises. Effective immediately. The two guards, who had hesitated earlier, no longer wavered. The crowd had shifted, the truth was revealed, and the order came from the one man they knew had the power to give it. They stepped forward, professional, calm, their presence towering over Isabella. No! Isabella's voice cracked, high and desperate. She stumbled backward as one guard approached, her manicured hand clutching at the air like she could grab back her authority. You can't do this to me. I built this event. I made it flawless. The words sounded hollow, pitiful against the tide of disapproval that surged from the guests. You tore up his invitation. You grabbed him like a criminal. You humiliated the host of the very event you were running. Every voice from the crowd was another nail in her coffin. Please, Isabella gasped, her eyes darting to Marcus, hoping for a flicker of mercy. I didn't know who you were. If I had known... Marcus's gaze was steady, unyielding. That's the lesson you never learned. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with dignity. The line cut through the air, sharp, final. The guards moved closer. Isabella's knees seemed to give way, her fiery red dress pooling around her as they took her by the arms. Her protests grew weaker, drowned by the sound of dozens of hands clapping not mockery, but approval. For every step she was led away, the applause grew louder, echoing against the stone walls, rising like a wave that carried Marcus higher even as it dragged her lower. By the time she disappeared beyond the arch of white lilies, the applause had turned thunderous. The garden no longer felt like hers. It was his. Marcus stood in the center, unmoved by the chaos he had calmed with nothing but truth and presence. The crowd watched him, waiting, not just for justice. Justice had been served, but for what would come next. And Marcus, quiet as ever, was ready to give them more. The applause still thundered as the guards escorted Isabella beyond the arch of lilies. Her fiery red dress vanished from sight, leaving behind only silence and the crackling memory of her downfall. Marcus stood unmoving, his calm presence the eye of the storm. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to the stage at the far end of the garden. The platform, built for speeches and announcements, gleamed under the soft morning light. It was waiting for him. The crowd instinctively parted, forming a clear path down the white carpet that cut across the lawn. Servers stepped aside, musicians lowered their instruments, and every camera followed his stride. Marcus walked forward, not fast, not slow, but with the deliberate pace of a man who had nothing to prove yet everything to say. His plain white shirt looked suddenly regal, a uniform of authenticity that no silk or gold could outshine. He climbed the wooden steps of the stage, turned, and faced them all. Dozens of phones lifted higher. The air stilled. Marcus set his phone down on the podium, tapped a button, and the live press feed flickered to life on the large screen behind him. A headline glowed bright. Horizon Tech finalizes $8 billion acquisition deal. Enter 4. Gasps swept through the crowd again, followed by a wave of cheers. The truth was undeniable, etched in pixels 10 feet tall. Marcus leaned toward the microphone, his voice steady, amplified, unshakable. Today was supposed to be about business, about announcing Horizon Tech's acquisition of Orion Systems, a deal valued at $8 billion. But this morning became about something more. The applause faded into silence. Every ear leaned closer. This morning became about dignity, about respect, about the reminder that who you are is never defined by someone else's assumptions. His words carried like scripture across the garden, burning into every phone recording, every live stream spreading in real time. I walked into this event quietly. I didn't flash titles or wealth. I didn't demand recognition. And what happened? My invitation was torn apart. My presence was questioned. My humanity was denied. He paused, letting the weight of silence deepen before his final strike. But dignity does not require permission. Respect does not need validation. And the truth, his voice grew firmer, almost thunderous, the truth will always reveal itself. The garden erupted. Applause crashed like waves against stone, echoing into the morning sky. Guests rose from their chairs, clapping, cheering, shouting his name. "Marcus! Marcus!" Oliver lowered his phone at last, breathless, knowing he had just captured a moment the world would not forget. Marcus's final words cut through the storm of applause, steady as ever. This is not just about an $8 billion deal. This is about never underestimating the quiet strength of respect. The ovation roared on, and as the morning sun broke faintly through the gray clouds, Marcus Deshawn stood tall, no longer questioned, no longer denied, only revered. The story was no longer Isabella's, it was his.